It's Mike Curtin here with another video on the Gehl Z35. This morning we're going to do an oil change. It's part of the 500-hour service and 1,000 hours, or just every 500 hours. If you don't use the machine a lot, it's probably a good idea to do it every 6 months, a year to max. Okay, so right off the bat, you want to keep the machine in this position, boom this way over the blade, because the drain plug is underneath the backside. If the machine was the other way around, the drain plug would be on top of the blade and it would be in your way. So hand it over. So right off the bat, we're going to need a few things to get started. Not very many tools. The first thing we need is make sure you have everything you need. You need 7 quarts of oil, 10W30. CF means just, I think, diesel engines. I went to the auto parts store. They said this is fine. Engine oil filter. Make sure you have the right one, 195568. You'll need a strap wrench. You'll need a 14 millimeter and a 19 millimeter. And then now that the machine is underneath, you back up a little bit so you can see it underneath the back door where the engine is. Also, you want to get the machine slightly elevated backwards downhill. This way all the oil sits on the oil pan towards the back, so when you pull the drain plug out, it really drains down good. If you can't get it dead level or uphill, it's not a big deal. I mean, you're only talking a couple of drops. But okay, so right underneath the back of this thing, you have a plate, a steel plate, and it's got 2 bolts here. That's the 14 millimeter. I always just loosen one like that, loosen the other one. Instead of taking it off, I just swing it over, and then underneath it is the drain plug. That drain plug is 19 millimeter, and well, you could crack it loose, but you got to have that bucket ready because it's like the hydraulic fluid. Once you pull that plug out, it's going to come. And on this particular machine, it's got approximately 7.7 quarts of oil. So you better be ready, because when you pull the plug off, it's got force. Okay, let's do it. Loosen it by hand. I can feel I'm getting close. It's starting to spin a little easier. I got my bucket ready, but it's there it goes, and you can see how black it is. It's gonna spit like that. Give me a rag, Osley. Thank you. You're worried about dirty hands? Come back up here. Just to help, it might be a good idea to take the engine oil cap off too, because it might be acting like a siphon. And that'll give the engine some air, like the straw thing in the diner. That'll help it spill a little faster. There we go. Okay, so while that's draining down, hop up here. While that's draining down, inside the cab in here, that's the engine oil filter. We're gonna use the strap wrench, loosen it, lefty loosey, tighty righty. We're gonna loosen it and put the new one on. So now you just put the strap wrench on there. It's only hand tight, so it doesn't take a whole lot of force, but once you get it going, that's all you got to do is just crack it loose. Stick your hand in here, spin it off. When you do it, try to turn it upright right away so any oil that's in the filter gets trapped in the filter and doesn't leak all over the engine. Okay, we're getting loose again. Spinning it off, spinning it off. Okay, now we're upside down like that. Good. Okay, so now I just pulled the new filter out of the box. What you want to do is just take a little bit of the old filter and grease up the O-ring here like such. You just want to give it a nice loop it up a little bit. It helps with the seal, and then it's going to go back on those threads. Be careful, don't cross that. If you cross that, man, you're in big trouble. So go slow until it grabs. And then I guess someone at Gehl got clever. They made us a little drip pan in here too. So when that's done dripping like it is now, it's got a hose, it's going down into the bucket. We're gonna wipe that clean before we put this thing back on. Just to try to, once this filter's on, you're not gonna be able to get it in there. Okay, so it ain't got to be spotless, you know what I mean? But it's pretty close. And then you're just gonna stick your hand in here and crank that. Hold on. There we go. See, you'll know when you got it because you could spin it, and it spins on pretty easy. Okay. That's hand tight. done. So now that the filter is tight, hand tight, according to the manual, you want to turn it 2/3 more of a turn to tighten it. So once that's seated, it's not much. You got to turn the strap wrench around the other way this time, and just give it another. That's it. And that's the end of it. That's the filter. I don't know if I said it before, but I'll say it again, that if when you change these filters, it's best to start the machine up too. Let it run for like 5 minutes or so. It heats up the engine oil a little bit that's in there and gets all the grimy stuff out. Once the oil filter is changed, it's still dripping down underneath it. You should let it drip down and make sure there's no more drops. I think it's stopped. But when you have a few minutes, go inside the engine area, wipe down any splashage or anything that's spilled. Or it's a good time to just kind of clean it up in here. The next step is putting the drain plug back in and then putting 7.7 quarts of oil. Pretty simple. Underneath. Yeah. You got to look for the. When I was taking this off, the O-ring came off. I don't believe it's a real. I think it's one of those gasket O-rings, and I just looked underneath there, and sure as shit, it's stuck to the machine. I don't have another one with me, so I'm gonna reinstall this drain plug now. If it leaks, I'll go back to the Gehl dealer and I'll buy another plug with a O-ring or a gasket and then make it tight. Right now, if you can see it yourself, I think she's pretty done down there. She's leaking, or she's done dripping. I'm not waiting all day for another drop, so we'll put this plug in. So now that we hand tightened the drain plug, which is in here, you go in here with the 19 millimeter and torque it down, make it nice and tight. You want to make it tight. I mean, it was pretty tight before, but you don't want to over tighten it where you strip anything out. After that's done, go inside that hole, wipe off any loose oil, and then swing over this data plate again, or this steel plate. You're gonna have to switch from 19 to, I think it is 14, and then you got to tighten up these bolts here. You want to cover this up. Now, when you, it's always a good idea every day when you're done driving, or even when you're driving after a service, an oil change, or a hydraulic flush, or antifreeze flush, that drive it for an hour or so. When you get out, well, start it, let it run for a few minutes and check underneath it, make sure there's no leaks, and then every hour or two after that, you should get out and check it, and then check the oil, just to make sure there's nothing leaking. You know what I mean? And if there's something leaking, you could always go back and re-snug something. Like I was saying, you could always go back and re-tighten a plug or snug up a filter. I'm a believer that you under-tighten, make it tight, but not overdo it right off the get-go, because you don't want to strip nothing or make leaks. Sometimes you over-tighten it, you can cause something bad to happen. So now that it's full, the next step is to pump 7 quarts of 1030 oil right into the cap. Definitely use a funnel oil, so it's going to go everywhere. And before you start the engine, we'll check the dipstick. Okay, so we have 7 empty cans on the ground. It's 7.7. I'm pumping in about 7.5, and then I'm going to check it, and then I'll put the extra half or quarter quart in when I'm done. Okay, so now the last step is to start the machine, let it run for about, a minute or two, just to get the oil circulating and everything, and then check the dipstick, nice and clear. We're up to the line, and there you have it, man. That's how you change an oil in a Z35.